Category 3 Hurricane Ian makes landfall in western Cuba, prompting strong winds and affectations to infrastructure. Venezuela and Colombia reopened their common border to enable the passage of cargo transport in the first step. Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador stated that there are interested parties seeking to hide the truth about the disappearance of the 43 students from Ayotzinapa. From the headquarters of teleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South, and I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. Now we begin with the news. Hurricane Ian continues strengthening rapidly while western Cuba experiences deteriorating weather throughout Monday with significant wind and storm surge impacts. As of 6 a.m. local time, Ian was located 25 kilometers south of Valle de Viñales and 40 kilometers from the north coast point of Puerto Esperanza. Hurricane force winds have also been occurring in Pinar del Rio with estimated maximum winds of 130 kilometers per hour with gusts that have exceeded 150 kilometers per hour, as reported by the Isla de la Juventud and Pinar del Rio weather stations. Ian is moving towards the north near 19 kilometers per hour, and this motion is expected to continue on Tuesday. According to the U.S. National Hurricane Center, Ian's eye is expected to move over western Cuba during the next few hours. Ian will then emerge over the southern Gulf of Mexico later on Tuesday morning. Ian also is a Category 3 hurricane on the Saffir-Simpson scale, and little change in strength is expected while Ian moves over Cuba. Ian is forecast to approach the west coast of Florida as a major hurricane. And also, ahead of Hurricane Ian approaching Cuba, more than 38,000 people were evacuated in the province of Pinar del Rio. Nearly 36,000 of them relocated in friends and relatives' homes. 58 evacuation centers were set up with all conditions necessary to protect people's lives. Hurricane Ian made landfall on Tuesday after it strengthened to a Category 3 storm with 185 meters per hour winds. Currently, Pinar del Rio is without power due to the force of winds. On Tuesday, Philippines braces after the passage of Typhoon Noru. Meanwhile, the Vietnamese seek shelter ahead of the storm. Vietnamese people take refuge at an elementary school used as shelter in Hoi An City after the country ordered hundreds of thousands of people to evacuate. Vietnam's storm control authorities said wind speeds will reach 160 kilometers per hour. Also, people in the Philippines are recovering after the pass of this typhoon that left shelters and streets homes flooded. On Monday, Noru left 6 dead in Philippines and hit the island nation as the strongest typhoon in the country's history. We now move on to other topics. Venezuela and Colombia reopened their common border this Monday to enable the passage of cargo transport in the first step. This event marks the resumption of diplomatic and commercial relations between the two countries. The Venezuelan president, Nicolás Maduro Moros, described this Monday as a historic and transcendental day for both countries regarding the reopening of the Colombian-Venezuelan border. The head of state pointed out that the two governments continue taking firm steps to advance in the total and absolute opening of the border between the two fraternal peoples. With the reopening of the border zone, it is expected that close to 3,000 direct and indirect jobs will be created in the area, in addition to the transport of inputs and raw materials from both nations. In statements to the press after the reopening of the Colombian-Venezuelan border, the president of Colombia, Gustavo Petro, highlighted as historic this step, while stating that it will allow a growing integration of the economies of the two nations.
I believe that today is a historic day for the region, for the country, for South America, for America in general. Globalization is first and foremost a relationship between neighbors. Anyone who measures international trade flows, cultural flows, population flows, will always find that the largest amount is always between neighbors. And that's how it was before sectarian madness took over hearts and brains. That's how it was between Venezuela and Colombia.
For his part, the Venezuelan Minister of People's Power for Transportation and President of Conviasa, Ramón Clandestino or Celestino Velázquez, highlighted the importance of the reopening of the Colombian-Venezuelan border.
Today, September the 26th, at 12 o'clock noon, when the protocol activities began, the pedestrian and cargo border crossing points were re-established in the state of Zulia, the state of Táchira, and the state of Apure. It is also very important to inform that the crosswalk point will be open according to the analysis made by the authorities from 5 in the morning until 6 in the afternoon, and the cargo crossing point from 10 o'clock in the morning until 5 in the afternoon.
Also, the Venezuelan official recalled that the reopening of these borders is part of the efforts to consolidate integration and brotherhood among peoples.
From the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, headed by our worker president, Nicolás Maduro, we are very happy for the opening, and we wish that this opening never again has the intention of closing. That this opening between brotherly peoples is permanent, that the border is an imaginary line. Those were the dreams and are the dreams of our liberators, and we on this side of history have to support that dream of our liberators and give continuity to the integration, to the brotherhood between peoples.
We'll take a short break now, but first, remember, you can now follow us on our TikTok account at teleSUR English, in which you will be able to see news in different formats, news updates, and more. More news coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. The President of Mexico, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, pointed out that there are interests that seek to hide the truth about the case of the disappearance of the 43 Ayotzinapa students. The president informed that the pact of silence and impunity is being broken by order to know the truth and allow justice to be served and those responsible to be punished. López Obrador sent a hug to the parents and relatives of the missing students, while stressing that the case has not stalled, and presented a report by the prosecutor Hertz Manero, who mentions the responsibility of former attorney Murillo Caram in the case. In the same context, the march for the disappearance of the 43 normalistas from Ayotzinapa took place, led by the parents of the young people who carried photographs of their children and red and white flowers. Normalistas from several states of the country also attended, as well as students from UNAM and the Pedagogical University, among others, as well as popular and union organizations. At the beginning of the march, the lawyer for the relatives praised the arrest of the former Attorney General of the Republic, Jesus Murillo Caram, as a step forward, but insisted that all those involved should be prosecuted. We have breaking news from Cuba. Let's listen.
Energy towards the system and consequently strengthening. This morning we were interacting and we saw the superior part of the eye at La Coloma in the municipality of Pinal del Rio, and 48 minutes was this territory affected. And so this is a signal of movement on this side of the Cuban territory. So it finally entered Pinal del Rio with 205 kilometers per hour wind, which rendered it Category 3 hurricane, very close to Category 4 in the scale. We can see here the areas of strong rains, storms that have been affected the western part of our country, but not only Pinal del Rio, but also the side provinces that have to be on alert still. We can notice a reduction of pressure. So at about 8 o'clock, the winds were still maintained at 205 kilometers an hour, but the central pressure had been reduced to 950 hectopascal. And it continues to become stronger. And given the position of the area of Pinal del Rio being so narrow and with low elevation, 800 meters at the most, these are not elements that will contribute to a weakening of the system. It's going to come out into the Gulf of Mexico with a very good structure. So we can see here the northern part of this eye coming out of Pinal del Rio, quite close to Puerto Esperanza in the municipality of Viñales. So it's going to move forward and become stronger around 9 o'clock. And that eye at that time will already be out of the Cuban territory, but the damage will continue, especially in the west and central regions. We have reported strong rains, 108 millimeters per hour in the location, in certain locations in Pinal del Rio. So these accumulations will continue. It would also be raining hard in Artemisa, in Mayabeque, and also in the province of Havana. This is going to continue, and gradually it will become smaller and smaller, and it will move on Tuesday and Wednesday towards the Gulf of Mexico. We are seeing bands associated to the hurricane that will contribute to the conditions, so we'll need to focus on the strength and pressure. Likewise, hurricane winds that have been hitting Pinal del Rio with winds of over 130 kilometers an hour and gusts quite above that speed. We have measured 208 kilometers an hour at one point. So this is going to continue during the early hours of the morning and the afternoon, because the eye is still on land in that territory, and until it doesn't move away from it, we will continue suffering the winds with tropical storm and hurricane storm hitting Pinal del Rio, but also other parts of the island. We will be witnessing sustained winds of 75-80 kilometers per hour. So this will be the effects the Cuban population in the west will be associating to the path of this hurricane, Category 3, but almost on the verge of Category 4. As to the sea, we have been receiving information of floods, moderate floods in the Isle of Youth and also in Pinal del Rio. This is going to continue in the coming hours, and then we will be feeling the presence of these in the Gulf of Mexico, so the north coast is going to be hit quite soon. This is what I have so far.
And we had live information from the Cuban Meteorological Institute, where meteorologist Aileen Justiz provided an update on the evolution and future course of the Hurricane Ian. Ian is close to Category 4 as pressure has downgraded, which represents a danger as the storm can intensify. The hurricane also shows a slow motion towards north while over Cuba's western region. It is also expected heavy rains in Mayabeque and Artemisa provinces. Also, high tide is expected given the strong winds. Let's go to a short break now. Stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Experts from the International Atomic Energy Agency present at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant confirmed that the plant is under constant attack by Ukrainian forces. The international body specialists pointed out that the stability of the city's infrastructure and the nuclear power plant are compromised, increasing the risk of an incident. They also described the safety situation at the nuclear power plant as unacceptable and called for efforts to resolve it. For his part, the head of the Zaporizhzhia administration, Alexander Volga, noted that the provocations of the Kiev forces continue non-stop, with massive attacks in the city and the coastal area. Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko met with his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin in Sochi. Lukashenko declared that Belarus and Russia will not tolerate humiliation by the Western countries.
Their future is with us, with Russia, which has everything they need. And they have something that we can buy, technology, etc. What else do they need? It is simply necessary to make responsible decisions, but if they don't want it, we will manage by ourselves.
16 cases of Ebola virus have so far been reported in Uganda since the fresh outbreak last week. Also, the health authorities announced that 4 people had died of Ebola in 3 days. All the deaths and cases were recorded in Mubende district, about 150 kilometers west of the capital Kampala. Emana Anyebiona, a spokesperson for the health ministry, stated that travel restrictions were imposed for non-essential work in Mubende district. The epicenter of the outbreak, Uganda, had previous outbreaks of Ebola, a disease that has killed thousands across Africa since it was first discovered in 1976 in neighboring Democratic Republic of Congo. Damascus was visited by a delegation of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine from the besieged Gaza Strip to promote efforts to strengthen the national unity of the Palestinian people in the face of the Israeli occupation.
The Gaza representation, in addition to its allies from Damascus and Tehran, met with the Secretaries General of all the Palestinian factions based in Syria. Meetings during which it was stressed that the current circumstances, both in the occupied territories and in the other member countries of the Axis of Resistance, are ideal for consolidating Palestinian national unity as a necessary means to advance on the path of the struggle against the Israeli occupation.
This meeting with the comrades of the Popular Front coming from Gaza comes after the recent battle called Unity of Fronts to confirm that the Palestinian people are united in support of the resistance, and this is the only way of the liberation of all Palestine. We aspire through this meeting and the planned dialogue sections between Palestinians in Algeria to reach a political agreement that will put an end to an internal division which makes our people suffer, since the Israeli occupation takes advantage of it to continue its aggressive and criminal policies against all of people. Therefore, they work tirelessly to consolidate national unity.
The Palestinians living in Syria appreciate Damascus' hosting of such meetings as part of their unconditional support for the just Palestinian cause and for any action aimed at closing the ranks of the Palestinian forces and the other members of the Axis of Resistance towards the common challenges headed by the occupation, terrorism, and Arab normalization with the Zionist entity.
Our meeting in Syria has a special significance because Syria as a people, army, and leadership never stopped supporting us since the beginning of the Palestinian Revolution until today, and therefore host this meeting as part of the management aimed at consolidating the union of the Palestinians and other peoples of the Axis of Resistance. We fixed these meetings on the rounds of dialogue to be held soon in Algeria to establish a roadmap to consolidate the strength of all Palestinian people in the occupied territories, and to strengthen the ranks of all forces and factions inside and outside Palestine with the framework of a single joint resistance movement.
In parallel, the Palestinian resistance faction in Gaza, in addition to expressing their support for national unity, insists on the need to increase preparation and willingness at the highest level to confront the aggressive Israeli escalation marked by assassinations, arrests, house demolitions, land colonization and expansion, as well as to achieve their main goal in liberating all occupied Palestine.
News teleSUR Oriente Medio.
And like this, we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.